I mentioned this before in relation to the magazine that's out on the table. I think there's still one there. The last copy is gone. Niyama ISHVARA magazine. Every 3 months they bring out a new issue, and every time there is articles about one Niyama or a Niyama. And in this particular issue, it was about surrender. ISHVARA PRANIDHANA. There were 3 different contributors writing about the issue, about the subject, surrender. And I frankly didn't find anything useful in the stories that they told. It was all about God and divinity and all kind of rubbish that in practice, in daily life, you can't do anything with. And I think this is one of the characteristic problems that you see with many people who teach yoga beyond exercise. When it starts including theory, also philosophy, people very easily end up on the intellectual level, approaching everything very theoretical, and basically lacking practical experience themselves. The result is that when you try to read an article like that, is either you are impressed because it's all about divinity and all these beautiful things, or you think, what the hell is this about? How can I apply this in my life? Surrender. The Sanskrit word that we try to explain and we use the word surrender for is Ishvara Pranidhana. Here you see the word prana, Pranidhana, prana. And this is what it is about. Prana, energy. This is what it is about. Ishvara means God, or something, not the concept of God that we have. The concept of God in yoga is that of the all-pervading intelligence that is behind everything. There is an intelligence, a universal intelligence that as a result of that intelligence there is inherent coherency in the universe on all levels, on macro level, on micro level. It is because of that you exist. That is Ishvara. So it's not an old man with a grey beard sitting on a cloud looking down at you. It is the all-pervading energy, the all-pervading intelligence, actually better to use, because it's everywhere, it's omnipresent. So what does it mean in this case then? God. Surrender. It means that we have to learn to accept that things are as they are, rather than going against it, rather than fighting it. Things are as they are for a reason, and rather than resisting, fighting against our predicament, it is better to accept it as it is in the first place, and then try to learn something from it so that you can constructively do something with it. Surrender is acceptance. But not, try to picture this. There are 3 different kinds of people. You have the lazy one, who is very lethargic and accepts everything. That is not this kind of acceptance. That is somebody who floats on the river and yes, you are in a canoe on a river and the river is flowing one direction, right? So the lethargic person who just accepts everything, yes, if God wants it, then it will be, and then I will start to move, or that person is sitting in his canoe, his paddle is just lying on the floor, and he bumps into all the rocks, and when the river makes a bend, he bumps into the river bank. No control. There's no control, no direction, just going down with the river, going with the flow. That is one. The other one is doing the opposite. The other one takes his paddles and he tries to row upstream constantly. Many people do that because they do not accept what is happening. They're constantly fighting, battling. So they're rowing upstream and basically just becoming exhausted without really going anywhere. And when you achieve something, it is a very hard-fought battle for which the price will be very high. The yogi, the third person, does a mix of the two. He sits in his boat with his eyes wide open, paddle in his hand. He doesn't try to go upstream, he goes with the flow, but while doing so, he controls the boat. And whenever there is an obstacle, he tries to go around the obstacle. So he doesn't bump into the rocks, he doesn't bump into the riverbanks in the bends. He's in control. Can you picture that? Three differences. One, just going with the flow, no control, just going where the river takes him. The other one trying to go upstream, impossible, totally exhausting. And the third one, in control. But accepting the flow of the river going down. That is how we are, according to this philosophy, how we are supposed to try to approach life. The things that happen in our life happen for a reason, and usually, or always, there is some message in those things that are happening. If we end up in misery, if we end up with bad relationships, there is something we can learn from it. It is useless to point fingers and say, you are, or I am bad, or... It is not a matter of good and bad, it is a matter of it is a maturing process. That so if you dare to draw a lesson from whatever it is that is happening, you will grow. Why is this important? Ishvara Pranidhana basically means letting prana flow by accepting what God has in store for us. I prefer to use the word higher powers rather than the word God, because most of us have some fixed idea about the word God. So letting prana flow by accepting what the higher powers have in store for us. Now, how do you apply this in your life? We have all experience in our lives. We have all experience in our life at times that we are being confronted with a very big problem. Some issue that comes on our path, an obstacle, a problem in a relationship, a problem in our career, just anything in our life. We are being faced with a big problem in our life, and we try to solve the problem by thinking. Almost every moment of the day that you have some room, that you are not busy with something else, you're breaking your brain on trying to solve this problem. And all that happens is you become very tense, the problem becomes more and more difficult the harder you try to think of it, and you become very frustrated. Day after day you try to solve, and day after day the solution to the problem seems to be farther away. So one day, after a couple of weeks or so, having tried to solve the problem, if you are clever, one day you say, forget it. This just gives me a headache and it is impossible to solve this problem. So let's just forget about it. The moment that you do that, you drop it basically, you drop the issue, and you go on. You go on with your daily things, you focus on your work, you make a walk on the riverside, whatever it is that you do, but you just let go. You detach basically from the problem that you had been trying to solve that seems to be impossible to solve, so you just drop it after a couple of weeks of frustration. Now what happens is, the moment that you are just totally unengaged, maybe you sit down in the park on a bench and you just feel the sun rays touching your skin, warming your skin. Suddenly, in a moment of clarity, you have the solution to the problem. Totally effortless. Totally effortless. And don't tell me that you've never experienced this. You've all experienced this at some stage and several times probably. How is this possible? For weeks you have been bashing your brain to try to find the solution, try to rationalize it, try to find logic. Impossible. Total frustration. All your energy got blocked. Prana got blocked. The more your energy gets blocked, the more you are lacking inside. And so the moment that you drop everything, you how do you say? You sigh a deep sigh. And your energy starts circulating again. The moment that you let go of the problem, detach, Korean person would say, shione. Energy starts circulating again, and in a moment of totally not being busy with your problem, and you just sit there doing nothing, a bright light occurs. And in comic books, they show it exactly like that. There is a light bulb shining light above the person's head, meaning that he had a bright idea. That's exactly what happens. What happened is that as a result of letting go and detaching, as a result of your surrendering, accepting basically that it's impossible to solve, in a moment of clarity you are capable of touching the essence of the problem. In a moment of emptiness, you have deeply understood the essence of the problem. And when you understand the essence of the problem, you know the solution. And most of the, always, the conclusion is much simpler than I thought. So, the conclusion is you have to learn to let go. You have to learn to surrender. That is easier said than done, but that is also a matter of experience and trial and error. And there are issues in our life that are easy to let go. We can apply this on certain issues because they are not of a matter of life or death. Because they are not essential for your survival. So then it is relatively easy to say at a certain point, consciously, okay, I learned that it's better to let go, so let's do that. But when it comes to very serious issues, you lose oversight. You forget the lessons that you have learned. And then you really have to learn by trial and error. The alternative is that you get sick. You make yourself sick. And I was exactly in that situation when I had the school in Ito. Because I made choices that were based upon my wish to have genuine yoga, I sacrificed my most important hours of the week to have classes with my teacher in Holland by the internet, by webcam. And we did that for 4.5 years. as a result of that, I did not have enough income to pay the rent. Sometimes I had more income, and then a couple of months less income, so I was always filling up the gaps. And working 7 days a week. If I was not teaching yoga, I was working on the computer to work out all the materials. And at a certain point, I was the one rowing up against the stream, actually. And it was so exhausting that at a certain point, I just gave up. Not because I had learned my lesson, it was out of survival that I did. Because at that moment, I had forgotten this lesson. Because it was a matter of life or death for me, that school. Because I started that school to be independent. Before that, I had yoga classes here and there and everywhere. And very often ending in conflict with the person with the or organization providing the room. So I was very eager to have my own place to avoid those conflicts, but it led to other situations. And that was also a lesson in never being guided by emotion. Because in anger towards those people that cause conflicts, when you use their place, they don't keep their contract, they don't keep their promises. Out of anger, I started basically that school in Itaewon. That is not a good motivation. So the school was established, independence was established, but then other issues occurred. I told you a little bit about a person in Holland who is now in his early 50s and is totally destitute, totally desperate, having the feeling that he lost everything after he chose the path of yoga, after he chose to follow his heart. He lost his family, he was married and he had children. He lost his family, his house, his professional career, he gave up to follow his heart. And he was in kind of situation as I was with the school, but he just totally gave up. He didn't surrender, he just totally gave up. Having the feeling that those 20, 30 years that he invested in practicing, studying, and teaching yoga is all lost. And that's what I had to deal with when I had to make the decision to close the school in Itaewon. So because of that, there was a huge blockage in me that kept my energy from circulating, and I just lost oversight. Until I got totally stuck, and then I said, well, I have to close the school and go on like this, and whatever will come after that, we will see, but this is not meant to be. And so I did decide to give it up. And I was relatively in peace with it. Then came the day that the demolition man came, they broke up. There was a floor like this, very nice dark wood, cherry wood. They came to destroy the floor and knock out the walls. And that was very painful. But the moment they were gone and I locked the door, I felt a big relief. And that's when the energy started flowing again. And I walked down the stairs and I got in my car with the dogs. I never looked back. And 2 weeks later, the telephone rang. Absolutely. In 5 years' time of having that school, me being so busy and occupied and attached especially, energy being blocked, energy started flowing and the telephone rang. The first thing what happened was, do you know the guy who made the magazine Eloquence? Eloquence? People who have been in Korea for a long time know the magazine. The guy, actually, he's a foreigner. Years ago, he drove a taxi in Seoul with a camera in the taxi. And at that time, there were no foreign taxi drivers. I have heard that there are some now at this moment. There was no taxi driver at all, foreigner. And so that led to very hilarious situation, because Korean people were shocked to find a foreigner. He's fluent in Korean. People were shocked. And that led to very funny situations. I don't mean shocked in a negative way, but very Very interesting. But anyway, this guy published a magazine called Eloquence for Korean people to study English. And he called me one day and I said, hey, I heard about you and why don't you advertise in my magazine? So I said, well, you know, I'm closing my school, so there's no need to advertise in your magazine. I have no money to advertise and my school is going to close, so no, I'm not interested. Then he said, let's meet. So I don't know why, but I agreed to meet. We met at Gecko's in Itaewon. And that is a strange thing, you know. I was not interested, but anyway we met. And so we met, and we sat at the table. And then he said, well, if you don't advertise, then why don't we have an interview? And he took out his laptop. And he wrote an interview. We had an interview on the spot. And he published that magazine. It's included on the wall, that article he wrote. You can maybe read a little bit of my cynicism about the commercial yoga approach in that article. He wrote that article, published it, and he had some kind of relationship with the guy managing here, who was then responsible for California fitness centers, which you know went belly up, not because of him. And so that guy called me a couple of weeks later. He read that article in his friend's magazine and said, why don't we meet? And I said, well, why do you want to meet? He said, I'm going to take over a gym and I'm interested in having you there running our yoga program. And I said, well, you know, I just closed my school and I'm not interested. I have other plans. And he did the same as the guy from the magazine. He said, let's meet, let's have a coffee. Why don't you come to Gangnam and we meet? So, I don't know why, but I agreed to meet. I was not interested, but I agreed to meet. And so I went and we talked. And when I left, I still told him I'm not interested. Because I had bad experience with Korean businessmen. So I told him I'm not interested. But one thing that struck me was that he was very, very straight, honest, direct. And that was something I've never found in people wanting to do something together. Anyway, I left him saying I'm not interested. And he called me a week later and he said, let's have coffee again. And I don't know why I went there. I was not interested, but anyway I went. And we had another coffee and he talked more and he tried, of course, to make a nice picture out of his plans and so on. Tried to persuade me, appealing to my ego. And the second time also I said, no, I have other plans. I think I'm going to immigrate to Australia. And then 2 or 3 weeks later he called me again and he said, let's go to Yo-Yo. I'm going to show you the place where we are going to make the gym. And then he showed me around here and he said, this will be your place and you will have your office and we'll put this and that. And so slowly I started to get to that idea. And the 4th time we met, I actually came to a conclusion that it could be a nice opportunity. And that's how everything came into being. You know, usually if I'm not interested, I would not even bother to meet. But I met with the guy from Eloquence. I met with this guy even 4 times. There are other things. That is no coincidence. Things just go like that as they are supposed to go. And the funny thing is, every time he introduced, because I'm the only foreigner working here, every time he introduced me to people, he always added, this guy was the hardest one to recruit out of all people that work here. You know why? He's like a king. Everybody wants to work in his organization because the pay is good, it is the most successful gym in Korea, California Fitness was very successful also. It went down not because of him, it went down because of the owner. He was not the owner. It was successful because of him, but the owner messed up everything. So everybody knows him. Everybody in the fitness world in Korea knows him, and everybody wants to work for him. And I didn't. So people don't understand. Usually it takes him 5 minutes to recruit somebody. It took him 4 times meeting me, 1.5 hours to 2 hours each time. And it's really funny. But anyway, it is because of surrender that things started to move again. My energy started to circulate again. That means that my energy also is out there. His energy picked it up, and so the telephone rang. If I had stayed occupied, my energy contorted, blocked, telephone would never have rang. You understand this? So surrender is that important, especially when it comes to matters of life and death. Because for me, that was one of the moments that I considered just not wanting to live anymore. Of course, I'm a coward. So I started making other plans, like going to Australia, for example. But that was very desperate time. And the moment that you surrender, things start to move again. And that was one of the most important lessons I had in my life. And this is a totally different story. With this, you can practically do something, rather than those funky stories about God and divinity, and that you have to give your life to God. And what can you do with that in your life? What does it mean? How do you do that, give your life to God? That's what's written in those articles about surrender. Not even explaining what it literally means. Yeah? It means letting prana flow by accepting things as they are and go from there. Don't try to row upstream, but also don't try to just give up and become a victim basically of the circumstances. That is the other side of the coin. The reality lies in the middle. So you're fully alert, you go with the flow, and when necessary, you step in and you make corrections to try to avoid the obstacles. And that also is mastership. The one who just goes down the river is lazy, inflicting a lot of damage on himself, every time bumping into rocks and the riverbanks. The other one, trying to row upstream, is stupid. That's a stupid one. The intelligent way is to go with the flow, but correct, stay in charge, stay in control. I've tried to row upstream and it is totally exhausting. You kill yourself, literally. Not metaphorically, but literally you kill yourself. Try to remember this next time when you are in big trouble. It can be with your relationships, it can be with your work, your career, with your future plans. But try to remember this and try to see if there is a possibility to just surrender and accept. First, just accept what is happening as an interference from above. Somebody or something is trying to tell you that you are on the wrong path. And that message is given to you in the form of resistance, in the form of misery, suffering. And you cannot overrule that. Because you just get tired. You are just fighting windmills like Don Quixote. And we all have to do this once or twice in our lives to learn the lesson. But hopefully with this explanation of what surrender can mean, it is crucial, I think, essential. I hope you will remember this when you are at such crossroads in your life. And with smaller issues, when you are dealing with problems that seem to be impossible to solve, try it out. Just let it go. Because actually most things solve themselves if you just detach from it. And with your increasing ability to contemplate, you will obtain the ability to feel the essence of situations. When you understand the essence of something, the nature of something, you have the answer to your question. You have the answer to your problem. It works like that. But it only comes to you when you let prana flow. That is what this means. Let prana flow. The question is, how do you do that? And that's what I'm trying to explain. That has nothing to do with God, of course, but it has to do with acceptance. And if you look at every holy book of whatever philosophy or religion has a concept like this. It is crucial. It is crucial in your development. It's crucial in maintaining good health, actually. Questions? Surrender? Can you do that? Surrender? Ryan?
Yeah, I have a question. It seems like paradoxical. Like when we talk about yoga being the science of controlling life, but
yes,
surrender seems to be like the opposite, or like a paradox. Can you like comment on that a little bit?
Sure. Yoga is full of paradoxes. One of them is that I'm standing here teaching yoga. You can control life, but you cannot change it. So you have to accept who you are and where you are being directed by the qualities that you carry within you, of which you may not be fully conscious yet. And as long as you ignore that, you can say the higher powers will throw misery at you until they have you going in the right direction. So as long as you keep ignoring that, you will have to battle. And it's a battle that you can't win. So I understand that you get the impression that it's paradoxical, but the control that you mentioned, that is the frantic way that people try to control their lives, that is the person rowing upstream and not going anywhere, just becoming totally exhausted. While the control of a yogi is not trying to turn the stream of the river around going up the mountain, because he knows that that's impossible, but he will go with the flow, and along the way he will see what he can do, what will come to him and will appear to be the logical next step to do. And once you discover this in your life, that this is actually possible, life becomes wonderful. And you stop worrying too much. The paradox in me is that on a causal level, I've always known where I'm going and I've been full of confidence that I would. But that is causal. You're not always functioning on causal level. Most of the times you are functioning on gross level, physical or mental. And you just don't, the moments that you try to rationalize that deep feeling inside you of confidence, you will break it down. Because you just don't believe it. But fortunately, I've always been a contemplative, meditative person. So I was very much strengthened by those many moments that I did have that faith in my qualities, in my future, in where I'm going with my life, in spite of all the things that happened in the past that were pointing in the opposite direction. That is also a paradox. But that is because of the battle, we call that the duality in yoga. That is the battle between the head and the heart. Your head is telling you the truth. Not concrete, not in words, but feeling. That is a deep feeling. And that is, I guess that is the characteristic of a religious person, a really religious person, not the fake one, not the hypocrite, but the real religious person. That is that deep connection with the soul, with the heart, and being convinced that whatever it is that you do is the right thing to do. And that, I think in the handout of the morning class, I mentioned something about going against the odds. Because you follow your heart, and you do not do what other people expect you to do. People say, get a job, get married and make children, build a career. And you follow your heart and you say, no, that's not what I want. I want something else. And people in the beginning, they say you are crazy. You are lost. You're a lost cause. But you deep in your heart feel that you are right. And so you stay on that path. It is not that simple. Because you are still a human being, you often fall down from your perch up there in heaven or in the causal level. You fall down from your perch, you descend into physical and mental body, so you have your doubts, very serious doubts often. And then you start to struggle when that happens. And that's why I mentioned the books of Alice Bailey, because Alice Bailey addresses this battle, this struggle. It's called the diseases of the disciple. And everybody will come across this. Because you are super sensitive, because you look at things in another way than most people do, that is why you will come across this. The books of Alice Bailey are of a higher order. That is really advanced yoga. But I mentioned it so that you at least, maybe you will not look at those books for the next 5 or 10 years, it doesn't matter. But when you get stuck, when you are full of doubt and losing your faith, maybe then you will start reading those books and you will find a lot of answers. And everything you are going through will be explained. Why do you go against all the odds? Because you refuse. Deep in your heart, you feel there is a dissonance with what people expect from you. Very often it is children in school who seems to be not going well. Because they are not interested in what they are learning in school. But then you are called a loser and a dropout. While in fact you have interests on another level. And if people would just stimulate that, you would become a wonderful person in that direction. But people don't understand that. Some teachers maybe do, but most teachers and parents don't understand that. So they start scolding you and making you feel bad about, but in fact you are the white sheep among the black sheep because you are more sensitive. You are the one who is basically connected with soul level, knowing actually deep in your heart, although you can't pronounce it in words, but knowing deep inside your heart where you want to go in your life and where you want to go with your life. And people then tell you you are a loser and you are a dropout and I don't know what other negative labels they put on you. But in fact, if you would have somebody who understood, they could help you and stimulate you going in the right direction and do something constructive with what you feel. You understand?
I think simply your control means control myself. I'm control myself. Surrender means accept. Can I think like this simply?
Yeah.
not control circumstance, control myself. But surrender means accept situation.
Yeah. Yeah. But it will all melt together. It will all become one. The control that you learn over yourself will eventually expand around you. But you have to start with yourself. Yourself is your playground. You learn, you play, you make mistakes and you learn more, and you play. And as a result of that experience every time again, you become stronger. And you gain a certain influence that you are not aware of, but other people feel that. So you start, little by little, you start expanding your sphere of influence. Yong-yang, your influence, you start expanding.
Energy.
Of course it is energy, it is positive energy, but people feel that. You're probably not even aware of it yourself. But your control helps other people as well. And eventually, you can consciously help other people. By teaching yoga, or in another way. But you have to start with yourself. If you can't control yourself, then you can never control your environment. You have to start with yourself. And from there, you deal it out. You make it bigger and stronger. There are many people, that's why this is also important, there are many people who live in the past. The things that happened in the past continue to bother and block people for many years to come. That is useless, that is destructive rather than being constructive. So also the bad things that have happened in our lives, maybe when you were a child, your parents divorced, and you were very hurt, or you were abused, or you were in a marriage that was very abusive and you divorced. Very painful process. But it is no use to live in misery for 10, 15, 20, 30 years because of those things that happened. Surely it has a deep impact. It will affect you for years, but at a certain point, you have to just accept it as it is. And especially accept it as a wise lesson from above. Try to do something constructive with it. And I know in some cases that is really difficult. Sometimes people ask me, what about a 3-year-old child that gets raped? That is impossible to explain that without becoming emotional. Yeah? That is another story. But do not let the past destroy your future. Go to any bar and you will find people who do just that. They sit in that bar 6, 7 days a week. They do their daily task, work, or whatever it is that they do. And as soon as they can, they end up at the bar. Just drinking their misery away. That is not going to get you anywhere. And I have drunk a lot of beer in the past too. It's useless. Better to look forward, and the past will solve itself. The problems of the past will solve itself. You only prolong it by sitting at the bar in misery, contemplating all the nice things in life that you think that you have missed. Because eventually you come to the conclusion that everything has taught you a wise lesson. Yeah, Michelle?
So then doesn't this relate back to the fritas, when you're sort of the memories of your past they come up. And so if you're trying to work beyond control or take over, overcome those memories that can still affect you in the present day, like how it's, I don't know, that's very confusing for me to understand how to work through that process. When you're ready to move on consciously, you're ready to move on from whatever might have happened in your childhood or whatever, but then, you know, like you were saying earlier, something you hear on TV or maybe something your sister says, it triggers it, and then all of a sudden you're in the past again and you're moving out.
Yes.
So then how do you...
You watch TV less, and when you watch TV you are very selective.
Well, not the TV, but...
You avoid all the bullshit programs that constantly trigger emotions, because look at it. Most TV programs, which are not reality programs, most non-reality programs, and most of it is non-reality, continues to trigger all kinds of, continues to push all kinds of buttons. Many people enjoy that, unconsciously.
Yeah.
But as a sensitive person, it hurts you all the time. So you start only watching Discovery Channel and History Channel and the news, and you forego all the drama and soap and all the fiction program, because that puts you on an emotional roller coaster all the time.
What if it's just not even with media, but with, let's say I had a very mean grandmother, so every time I interact with an old woman, you know, it's just an example, I have this sort of voluntary reaction. So
Yes.
how do I...
You avoid your grandma. No, seriously. You have to detach from your grandma. You know, I'm in Korea and I don't want to go back to Holland. And I don't have any mean people in Holland. But I come from a big family, I told you before, and we had a very tumultuous past. If I go back to Holland, I get sucked up in the past, and I don't want that anymore. So I go to Holland now and then to visit my family. But it's getting less and less. I don't feel need anymore. And whenever I go, I can't wait until the day that my ticket tells me I can go back to Korea again. Because my heart and my soul are here. My home is here. But that is because of this. I consciously avoid all those triggers that bring me back to the past, into melancholy, into constantly regurgitating all those events of the past. I had many big adventures as a young boy. Wonderful, with a glass of beer, thinking about that. But it's very sad, because I should have been in school, or I should have been doing something constructive. So it's of no use to hang around there and basically stop living, because that is what is happening. And I've seen that happening with my brothers. They're just vegetating. You understand? So, as a sensible person, being plagued by memories, you try to avoid whatever it is that is triggering those memories. So in case of a person that has treated you bad in the past, mean, you try to avoid that person as much as possible in a reasonable way. Because you don't want to turn around and become mean yourself to that person who treated you mean. Because as a wise yogi or yogini, you understand that whatever it is that people did to you was done in ignorance. You are the one to break that cycle of karma. If you look at families with abuse, it is often a thing that goes back many generations. I know a woman who was abused by her father, not sexually, but physically, mentally, emotionally. But her father was also abused by her grandfather, who was abused by his father, etc., etc., etc. So people, unknowingly, ignorantly, they just continue to have that same tendency, which they hated so much. And they do the same thing with their children that they hated so much when they were a child. Intelligent human being says, no, I will stop this. I too want to beat up my child, but I'm not going to do that. I hated this so much when I was a child. It has damaged me so much. I will not allow this to happen. And this sounds as something very simple to do, and it is not. There are few people who are able to break this cycle of karma effect. But that is your duty as an intellectual, sensible human being, as a yogi. That is your duty, to break that cycle of karma. So you don't turn around to become mean to your grandma, but in the most reasonable way you try to avoid her as much as possible. In this case, grandma, or it can be your father, or your partner, ex-partner, or... And also the thing with the TV. I hate watching TV. I haven't watched TV for many years, and then I have a TV again. But my watching behavior has totally changed. I can't watch for a minute all this fake acting on TV, in the soap series, in the dramas, in most movies also, really totally, I feel repelled by it, repulsive. Because you know it is fake. When you are young and ignorant, you are sucked up in the movie or in the story. And when you are older, all those emotions that are being triggered by it are just disturbing. And because as a result of your yoga practice and your continuing development, you become nice, calm, peaceful, and you cannot stand it anymore. You have become too sensitive and too aware to continue to expose yourself to that rubbish. And the only thing that interests me is information. Informative programs, documentaries, there are some very beautiful movies with real life stories. That is touching. That can also trigger emotion, but that is real. For the rest, I'm totally not interested in most of what the TV has to offer. Why? Because you just avoid the buttons being pushed all the time. It's not constructive. Every time it puts you back into the past, while it is better to stay in the present and look forward. And if you have dealt with trauma, with very deep going experiences, that takes some years to overcome, maybe some decades even. But that is the way to go forward. Avoid it. That's the sensible thing to do. You cannot turn back the clock, you cannot change it, so you accept it, you practice surrender in that sense. But you do not have to revisit time and time again the triggering of that emotion. But for example, the example that you give by visiting your grandma or allowing her to visit you, or maybe one day you should have a good talk with her and she might say, yeah, I was ignorant at the time and I'm really, really deeply sorry about, I never meant to hurt you. Or in that way you can also, of course, make a big step forward. But if that's not the case, just avoid it. Just avoid it. You will see in your development as a yogi that there will be people that you don't want to meet anymore. Maybe you have 100 friends now, and eventually you will find yourself with only 2 or 3 left. And all the other people, there you don't feel connection anymore, because you start to see the real essence of that so-called friendship that was there, but appears to be no friendship at all in the end. Everything will change in your life, also in that sense.
Should we feel a sense of obligation to, I don't want to say confront the people of the past, or to try and make the situation correct, if that's the right word?
Not an obligation, and only only if you feel that you can do that without violating the yamas that we have learned. And if you have had a very heavy experience, maybe it will happen that when you grow up, one day you will confront a person with his wrongdoing, but in hindsight, later on, you will see or come to the conclusion that that was also a little bit over the top. So you go about that in a kind of diplomatic way. Trying, surely it is good, if necessary, to confront people, but do not cause another problem as a result of that. So in many cases, those people are totally not interested in talking with you about what happened in the past. And if they are, you will feel that, you will know that at a certain point. If not, it's better to go your own way. Try to let it rest. Difficult as it may be, but the more you go forward and are occupied with your present and your future, the more it will lose its importance.
It's like I'm not certain about other people, but I tend to feel like I don't know if it's a social pressure or religious kind of, from my religious past upbringing, that somehow you have to, I feel this thing pushing me towards confronting the past or the people of the past, and I'm not really...
Like in terms of forgiveness?
Maybe, yeah. Trying, I don't want to say saving their soul or making them aware of their behavior that created problems, but I guess in a way I feel bad. It's like I'm jumping ship. I'm letting other people just go down with the ship and I'm going to save me.
Yeah, you can look at it in that way, but look at it in another way. You are from a next generation and things are evolving. So you also, as part of that line of generations, are evolving. And you can start a revolution by breaking the cycle of what has always been practiced in the example you give in a religious way, full of dogmas and rituals. You are the first one. You stay with one foot in your religion and faithful to your religion, but with a fresh outlook on it. And rather than correcting the past, which is very difficult and is actually rowing upstream, you have another task ahead of you. Try to enlighten people with the insights that you have. And raise your children without dogmas and rituals that you have come to the conclusion are not constructive. Or even maybe you have come to the conclusion they are lies or they are violent, but that's better to go forward rather than to go back. The people who have educated or brought you up like that, they did the best they thought they had to do. So they didn't mean harm to you. They may have harmed you, but in ignorance. And you bring that to the next level in a more enlightened way and free of dogmas. And that is much more constructive and I think much more rewarding than trying to correct people from the past. That will be a very hard battle because they may be totally unwilling to actually change their point of view. Why? Because it means that they will have to admit that they were wrong, and many people can't do that.
Right.
So you raise your kids and your students based upon the enlightened insights that you have received. And that, in that sense, you can be grateful also with what you have been taught, because that has brought you to this point that you have much more to offer to the people who need your insights.
Other than confronting someone, can you not forgive them from within? And isn't forgiveness and surrender really
Absolutely.
related?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that-
So all religious and philosophical books are not only mentioning surrender, they also mention forgiveness. And you do not forgive people for the sake of themselves, but for yourself.
Right.
Because if you don't forgive, you are full of poison. So yes, absolutely. And it is very much related to each other, because forgiveness is based upon understanding. That's why I mentioned many times, or several times, the word ignorance. most of the times that people did wrong to you or to somebody else, they didn't mean to. It just happened. Because they didn't have the insight to know what they were doing. That's why Jesus said, please, my Lord, forgive them, because they don't know what they are doing. When he was nailed to the cross, that's what he said. At that moment, he deeply understood that there were just a bunch of young soldiers there, young guys, full of testosterone, and they did what they were told by their commanders. So he felt compassion for those young people because he understood their ignorance. And that should make you think.
I think in the traumas that you were talking about, if somebody has a trauma, then if they can find that forgiveness in the person that created the trauma, then when these other things come up, I don't know, on TV or whatever, then it's not going to affect you as much because you've already gone through the process of forgiveness.
Yeah, and you look at it in a very different way because you have become very analytical in that sense. Yeah. But very important. Forgiveness is based upon your understanding. If you understand that your mom or your father treated you bad, abused you or whatever, because of this eternal cycle from generation upon generation, because of ignorance, and not to just consciously harm you, then you have made a big step forward into your heart opens up, even for a person who hurt you. Compassion. And that is a very good quality that would be nice if many people would have.
So is surrender and forgiveness separate, or?
No, I think it is very closely linked with each other. It is both based upon insight and understanding, but understanding honestly. Trying to understand the essence of what is going on. Trying to understand the essence of the person. I can blame my mother for many things, you know. I could. I can blame my father for many things. But it's useless. They did what they thought was the right thing to do at that moment. And they had no room or insight in doing more. And they didn't do anything bad, actually. So that's useless. I appreciate them for what they did and not for what they didn't do. I'm not angry at them for what they didn't do. In the past, of course, it was different. But there are many good things coming forth out of that situation. So, useless. In the end, it is useless. It is counterproductive. Yeah. Forgiveness, absolutely. Very great quality that we should have in combination with this. It comes down to the same in the end. When you talk about situation between people. Okay. Yes, Elizabeth. No, go
I'm
ahead.
short on time, but
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more about not using the word I. And
Yes, absolutely. In Korea, people never say I. Never. They always talk about we, us. And it's not because they study yoga, but that is kind of an oriental thing. Not to always point to yourself. It's a little bit superficial. I'm not saying that it is always good, but it's a little bit that idea. There are royal people, the Queen from Holland, for example, she always speaks in plural form. And then people say, our Queen, she's so arrogant, she always speaks about us and we did this and we did that. Thinking that she's more special and talking about herself in plural form because of that. But that is only to avoid I. To avoid saying, I did this and that, and I am responsible for doing such and such. That is actually more like taking a high road of royalty. And you can see many people when you watch the news, people are being interviewed. And very often people are representing some organization or group, and I always get a nasty feeling when people say, I did this and I did that, while they're actually speaking for the group. And it just sounds so much more gracious when people speak for the group. And what this is about, what you are reading, it is merely to instill group consciousness, rather than to focus on selfish interest. It is about taking care of the environment, being concerned with the well-being of the group that you live in, rather than only focusing on yourself and your own interest. And why did I mention this about Korean culture and society? You have that concept here, but it is often driven too far and very superficial, so it is actually harming people as well. Do it in a natural way, when it is applicable, but do not push it too far in a superficial way, where you basically deny your own interest. That is what I see happening very often. I think as a yoga practitioner, you will in a very natural way come to the point where you start to be concerned about things that go far beyond yourself. Let me give you a simple example. I'm always considering the environment. I'm always considering other people's interests. Yeah? But then I go to a country where there are two kinds of approaches. People here are very sophisticated in separating garbage. The apartment where I live, everything is separated. And in the end, just a small bag of real garbage goes into the container. And all the rest, plastic and paper and batteries and lamps and glass bottles, everything is separated. But then, people turn on the heater in the winter, and when it is too hot, they open the window. They don't turn down the thermostat, they open the window. So I can't make sense out of that. I don't understand that. So that is the paradox that I find there. Another thing is, since 2 years, I live in an apartment here, just across the street, and I have a bathtub. So I like taking a bath. But then, when I am finished taking a bath, there is like 250 liters of water there that I cannot just flush away. I just can't. But I have a couple of very big plants in my house, so I have a water can. And that watering can is in my bathroom. And every time I flush the toilet, before it can fill up automatically, I take a scoop with my watering can and pour it into the reservoir. So I'm not wasting the water that I use to take a bath. Now, somebody visited my house one day, and of course people are baffled actually, seeing that. It's strange, a little bit, maybe some disconnection in your brain or so. What are you doing? Then I explained, I'm saving water. So the conclusion was, yeah, you're saving, yeah, so you can save money. But it was not about money, because water is very cheap. I would save maybe 1,000 won per month. So I'm not that stupid. It's not about money, it's about just consciousness, group consciousness, care for the environment. I just cannot pull the plug and throw away 250 liters of water because I took a bath in it. I can't. That is group consciousness. Can you follow a little bit? It's not about money at all. And let me be weird or a stranger or a strange guy. But that goes against my feeling to just flush that water away. So I just continue to do like that. Of course, if I have visitors who I think will react in a very strange way, I will close the reservoir and put the watering can away, so I don't have to explain. But in general, I really don't care what people think of it. But that's group consciousness. So that is not superficial, that is based upon what you feel. Many people, when they are in their late teens and beginning 20s, they have a short period in which they become very caring about the environment. They become idealistic. It's the people that drive the Greenpeace organization and all the environmental organizations. We will talk about this when we discuss the chakras. Because it's related to your development. And we all go through such a period. In later stages of people's lives, people totally change. And they become totally selfish again. As a yogi, you don't. Anyway. Group consciousness. Do you feel comfortable when you talk about yourself? Most people, if you're at least a bit sensitive, feels kind of ugly.
Well, when I was applying to graduate school a year ago, it was like driving me insane, trying to write about myself and things that I did. And it's just terrible. It was torture. It was painful, literally.
Yeah, then you're a sensitive person. I have a sister-in-law, my oldest brother. They're not married, but they've been together 20 years or so. They have 2 kids. And she always wants to be in the center of the attention. And my oldest brother, is a taxi driver, and every 2 years he buys a new car. It's always funny to see how she talks about that. I bought a new car, she says. And that, I just want to burst out laughing, but you don't do that because you're civilized, you know. So you just accept it as it is. That's so stupid. Why would you say something like that? You can say we bought, or he bought, or at least say we. But I bought, she has no money, she doesn't have a job, she's just a housewife, she didn't buy anything, and she's not using that car either. It's my brother's work too. But she just wants to be in the center of attention, so she's trying to draw all the attention to her in that way. But that's funny. It's ludicrous. Yeah. So that's the opposite of the group consciousness thing. As a family, they are 4 together, and a couple of cats. We talk about we and us, and nothing I this and I that. It doesn't feel good. If I watch TV and I see people, like I said just before, representing an organization and they say I this and I that, something doesn't click inside me. It gives a bad impression of that person. Okay, we have to get started, I'm afraid. There's so many things to talk about. There's no end to it, but we'll have to go on. If you have questions, just make a note of it and write me an email or keep it for next week. 5-minute break.